Welcome to the session on literary criticism, where we would be looking into Principles of Literary Criticism, Chapter 1. Principles of literary criticism could be considered as a turning point in the history of English criticism because it delves into various facets of art, its value, appreciation, and language employed. In the preface to the book, Richards expresses the view that the book could be compared to, I quote him, a loom that reweaves and unravels the civilization of the human race, unquote. This means that the objective of his book is to reassess and construct a new argument which would present the existing thoughts about the activity of criticism from a perspective not heard before. Richards states that several chapters are lengthy discourses on value and many of them deal with general psychology. The use of psychology was unavoidable because of its relevance in explaining several aspects of the value of art. He also expresses the view that the chapters employ illustrations to be applied to the statements made so that the reader could actively participate in judging the appropriateness of the arguments presented before them. Let us now explain the essay. In the opening chapter of Principles of Literary Criticism, titled The Chaos of Critical Theories, Richards points out that the literature of criticism is a rather significant field of study which dates back to the contribution of the great scholar Aristotle, who is probably the first intellectual to have followed the practice in his age. The modern student who surveys the field of criticism would probably be intrigued about the contribution of criticism, its strengths, and its incorrect assessments. Criticism is also apprehensive about the nature of experiences and the actual process of using experiences which are associated with the activities like observing a picture, playing music, or reading a book. The critics seek to answer several questions such as the nature of value that would be obtained from the experience of reading a poem, the difference between experiences felt, a picture being given preference over the others, the quality of music to be listened to in order to obtain the most valuable moments, and the difference in quality about works of art. These fundamental questions could be compared to certain basic questions such as what would constitute a picture, a poem, a piece of music, the process of comparison of experiences, and the value of experiences. The best critics, argues Richards, who have contemplated on these questions do not provide a satisfactory answer. Criticism has perhaps contributed a few assumptions, isolated observations, some far-reaching conclusions, and dogmatic approaches to identify a few. To justify his argument, Richards provides quotes from Aristotle, Longinus, Horace, Boileau, Dryden, Addison, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Carlyle, and Matthew Arnold. Richards mentions a plethora of quotes to substantiate these statements that are made by critics through observation, but none of them address the central concern of the estimation of the value of a work of art. To quote, all men naturally receive pleasure from imitation, unquote. He also mentions poetry is chiefly conversant about general truth. All these are quotes mentioned by the different critics. I quote each and every one. It demands an enthusiasm allied to madness. Transported out of ourselves, we become what we imagine. Beautiful words are the very and peculiar light of the mind. Let the work be what you like, provided it has simplicity and unity. De gustibus, of writing well, right thinking, and the beginning and the fount. We must never separate ourselves from nature. Delight is the chief, if not the only end. Instruction can be admitted, but in the second place. The pleasure of fancy is more conducive to health than those of the understanding. The spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling. The best words in the best order. The whole soul of man in activity. Unity in variety. The synthetic and magical power of the imagination. The eye on the object. The disimprisonment of the soul of fact. The identification of content and form. A criticism of life. Empathy favorable to our existence. Significant form. The expression of expressions, and so on. These quotes explicitly show that the best thinkers have tried to arrive at a plausible explanation of the value of art. However, they do not contribute effectively to consider the true merit of art. Richards is of the view that some of the observations made are starting points for reflection, but all these quotes, taken either together or in any combination, fail to provide a satisfactory assessment of the true value of art. These findings discuss appreciation of particular poems and works of art, comment on, elucidate or appraise art. However, the central question concerning the value of art, the reason why considerable time is devoted by the best minds to find an explanation, and the significance of the practice of criticism in the system of human endeavors remains unanswered. At this juncture, it could be surmised that there has been no endeavor to explain the value or the aesthetic state of art. Critics have so far only tried to reason out, use intuition and frame arguments in criticism. They haven't thought of including the necessary facts or thinking about the matter or finding out a suitable method to assess the value of art. Much useful information upon the processes which make up the appreciation of works of art has only been skillfully summarized. This suggests that there are certain defects in the experimental work on aesthetics, because the assessment of the value of art, if not executed properly, could reduce the activities done to work in the experiments conducted in a laboratory. Aestheticians begin with aesthetic choice and use elementary forms such as basic colors, peculiar rhymes, rhythm and meter that are open for investigation. It remains to be scrutinized whether anyone has ever simultaneously looked at a picture or read a poem and remained inside a psychological laboratory or conversed with a representative psychologist. It is seen that under the influence of a simple stimuli, different persons would respond in divergent ways at variable times when they are in extremely diverse states of mind. From this, it could be concluded that highly complex objects such as pictures would arouse a variety of responses from the viewers that would invite an inquiry into the process of comparison of experiences. An important point arises at this stage. One could suppose that the simpler the object thought about, the more varied the responses would be. It is difficult to think about a comparatively simple object by itself without looking into the context in which it is used. To prove his point, Richards gives the example of the word night, which would raise different thoughts and feelings in the persons who hear it. The range of variety of the meaning of the word, when used in isolation, cannot be restricted. But if the word is used in a sentence and the variation is narrowed down, when used in a context, its meaning is further fixed. And if it is used in a poem, the responses of competent readers may be similar. This way, it could be ascertained that its occurrence in a particular context and the meaning deciphered from its context are appropriate. So, what could be the significance of this chapter? I quote Christopher Isherwood, who says, I quote him, "To us, Richards was infinitely more than a brilliantly new literary critic. He was our guide, our evangelist, who revealed to us in a succession of astounding lightning flashes the entire expanse of the modern world." Unquote. Richards emphasizes that years of critical activity have not been able to ascertain the value of art. Though there have been several critical pronouncements at every stage of the development of the processes of creation, contemporary critical activity is in chaos because of the inability to arrive at a possible assessment of the value of art. In this regard, Herbert Reed in the Criterion mentions, Principles of Literary Criticism is an important contribution to the rehabilitation of English criticism, perhaps because of its sustained nature, the most important contribution yet made. Mr. Richards begins with an account of the present chaos of critical theories and follows with an analysis of the fallacy in modern aesthetics. Let us recap what we have done so far in this session. Principles of Literary Criticism directly points out to the activity of deriding value from the arts, especially the art of poetry. In many ways, the basis of all Richards' statements on criticism, this argument sets into action the fundamental critical and artistic theories in search of value of art. He begins this complex study by indicating several impediments which often preclude valid criticism. The first is, I quote, experimental aesthetics, unquote, in the arts, where futile attempts are made with human tastes and actions to suit laboratory examination. Second, criticism tends to concentrate on secondary aspects of the arts and thereby ignores the subject of value. Third, the language of criticism causes misunderstanding because of its vague, often deceiving vocabulary. A suitable instance would be the critics who speak of objects of art as if the objects themselves possess qualities, whereas what they should say is that the objects evoke effects in us. All this being said, we have questions for you to answer that would help you to understand what Richards actually wanted to propose in his Principles of Literary Criticism. Till we meet next time with further elaborations, thank you.